Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Trump reverses Biden's ban on offshore drilling and calls a New York judge responsible for convicting him for the hush money case deranged. A devastating earthquake kills 126 people in China, according to state media, near the Tibetan holy city of Shaghatsa. The British government announces new legislation to tackle child abuse, but says it won't open an inquiry into UK grooming gangs. And 10 years on from the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris, President Macron pays tribute to the victims who lost their lives. To our top story now, and President-elect Donald Trump has been speaking in Florida ahead of his upcoming inauguration in just 13 days' time. He announced he'll be reversing Joe Biden's decision to ban new offshore drilling along America's coastline in one of his first acts as president when he enters the White House. He also called the New York judge who's scheduled to sentence him for the hush money trial as deranged. Let's hear what he had to say.
President Biden's actions yesterday on offshore drilling, banning offshore drilling, will not stand. I will reverse it immediately. It'll be done immediately. And we will drill, baby, drill. And we're going to be drilling in a lot of other locations. And the energy costs are going to come way down. They'll be brought down to a very low level. And that's going to bring everything else down. That's what caused it to go up, along with the ridiculous spending on the Green New scam. All this money, trillions of dollars. It's like throwing it right out the window, what they're doing.
Let's listen in on Donald Trump now. He is speaking from Mar-a-Lago in Florida.
That was the number he gave by saying, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. And as soon as I said that, the money came pouring in. But Obama could have said it. Other people could have said it. Bush could have said it. Nobody said it but me. I took a lot of heat. They said, oh, that's a threatening statement. Well, they weren't paying their bills. I said, we're not going to protect you if you're not paying the bills. So in a true sense, I saved NATO, but NATO's taken advantage of us. And one of the problems that I have, and I've said it openly, I said it to President Zelensky, Europe is in for a tiny fraction of the money that we're in. Now, whether you like that situation or not, Europe is much more affected than the United States. We have a thing called the ocean in between us, right? Why are we in for billions and billions of dollars more money than Europe? And you know, they're a similar size, a little smaller, but they're a similar size economy as the United States when you add them up. And yet Europe is in for a small fraction of the number the United States is in. Now, Biden could have called them up during the term. That's what I did. I said, you have to pay your bills. And they all, one stood up. I won't say who, you'll probably have it, because the papers, the media hated to report on it. But the prime minister stood up from a country, you know, our famous meeting of 28 nations with no press, no anybody in the room. He stood up, he says, does that mean if we don't pay our bill, and at that point it was 2%, it should be 5%. It should be 5%, not 2%. But at that point it was 2%, but many people didn't pay. Some people didn't pay anything. But many people were way, including Germany. Germany was at less than 1%. You're going to press for 5%? Well, I think NATO should have 5%, yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2%. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, you know, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%.
Let's get reaction from our correspondent, Nick Harper. Nick, good evening to you, and thank you for joining us. This is the second press conference Trump has given since his election win. We've just been watching a snippet of it there. What were your main takeaways so far? I was listening to it. There's lots of topics he's decided to cover.
Lots of topics bouncing around really from one topic to another without pause, and now taking questions on another whole range of topics. One of the things he did say was that he felt America was heading into a golden age with him returning to the White House. He spoke about it approaching the dawn of America's golden age, saying that the whole world was now different. He started this press conference by making a very sizable announcement, saying that the United States would now be engaging in a multi-billion-dollar investment in data centers, working with a partner in Dubai, DAMAC. He appeared with the chairman of that organization and outlined how the Dubai-based company would be working with the Trump organization and various others in the United States to put those data centers in multiple states right across the US. He returned to one of his favorite topics, the economy. He said that the economy would be turned around very quickly when he enters the White House. He said it would take off like a rocket ship. He did say that there was inflation at levels never seen before, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that inflation has come down dramatically from the post-pandemic highs of more than 9%, currently now around 2.7%. He also spoke about the Panama Canal, a main topic of recent weeks. He wants the United States to take over control of that canal. He says that they've been in touch, it's leaking, and that they want $3 billion to fix it. His suggestion is the US just takes ownership over it, pointing out he feels that they have violated, Panama that is, violated the agreement in place. He spoke about tariffs. He said there'd be plenty of those coming in. He said he was going to have to settle the world's biggest problems and highlighted the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and even said that there would be a name change coming to the United States when he enters the Oval Office, saying that the Gulf of Mexico would be renamed to the Gulf of America. Plenty in there, plenty to be chewed over in the coming hours and to be digested, but clear that he's already making news 13 days ahead of re-entering the White House for the second time.
Yes, indeed, Nick. And he's called the New York judge who is due to sentence him on Friday deranged. That's not going to help his case, is he? And he also had some harsh words of criticism for some of those authorities.
Yeah, that's right. Juan Merchant, the judge presiding over this hush money case in New York. There is no love lost between the two of them. This coming off the back of Juan Merchant rejecting a proposal from Team Trump to delay the sentencing that's due to take place on Friday. Late on Monday, the judge declined that request, saying that the petition was really a repetition of arguments that Trump's lawyers had raised in the past. However, Juan Merchant has already said that sentencing on Friday will not include any prison time for the president-elect. He is not expected to spend time in jail at that sentencing. But Trump's lawyers are now putting out one last-ditch attempt to try and delay this sentencing past his presidency. They're now putting in an appeal to the New York Appeals Court, hoping to try and dismiss the conviction. Juan Merchant, though, the judge, very keen to go ahead with this. He says it's really the only way to settle all of this once and for all, to have the conviction done and dusted before Trump re-enters the White House.
Nick, I also just want to talk to you about Joe Biden's decision to ban new offshore drilling and what Donald Trump said during that news conference. We heard drill, baby, drill, his motto. Are we all surprised that he's going to overturn this decision by Biden?
No surprise at all. That drill, baby, drill has become a catchphrase of his. It came to light during the course of the election. Really, that desire to ramp up domestic production of oil and gas right across the United States. He says that that is pivotal to US manufacturing, to US jobs, to really US standing on the world stage, to become self-reliant on oil and gas production, to increase that as much as possible. But complicating those efforts was Joe Biden's announcement, an executive order on Monday, which will ban any new offshore drilling for oil and gas, really covering the vast majority of the US's coastline, about 625 million acres. There is a wrinkle in all of this. Joe Biden has made it very difficult for the incoming president to overturn this. He used a Lands Act dating back to the 1950s and set no end date on this ban. Both of those things in conjunction mean that it is almost impossible for an incoming or a future president to overturn that ban that has been put in place by Joe Biden. However, Donald Trump making it very clear during the course of this press conference, it will be one of his main aims when he enters the Oval Office in under 2 weeks' time to overturn that ban so that the United States can increase the oil and gas production, something that he is very keen to try and achieve during his next 4 years in office.
Nick Harper in Washington, thank you so much for joining me this evening. To a developing story now, and an earthquake measuring a magnitude of at least 6.8 rocked the northern foothills of the Himalayas near one of Tibet's holiest cities earlier today, with state media reporting that 126 people have been killed, shaking buildings in neighbouring Nepal, Bhutan and India. Chinese state media also reported that about 1,000 houses were damaged and at least 188 people have been injured. Laura Westbrook reports.
Chinese state media said the earthquake struck at 9:05 a.m. local time, with the epicenter located in Tingri. This is a rural county in a remote part of Tibet, near the Himalayan border with Nepal. Hours later, the death toll has started to rise, and we're getting a picture of the damage. Video on Chinese state media from the area showed hundreds of houses had collapsed and debris in the road, making it hard for people to get around. In photos published by state media, rescuers appeared to be digging through piles of rubble from toppled houses using ropes, shovels and working by hand. Now, Tibet sits on the seismically active Himalayan region and is prone to earthquakes because of the collision of the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates. The closest city to the quake's epicenter was Tibet's second largest city of Shigatse, home to about 800,000 people, and it's also regarded as a holy site, as the seat of the Pancham Lama, the second highest spiritual leader in Tibetan Buddhism after the Dalai Lama. Now, hundreds of soldiers have been deployed, as well as fire and rescue workers, to search for people. But aftershocks, the remote location and cold temperatures of up to minus 15 degrees Celsius are hampering those efforts. Chinese President Xi Jinping called for all-out efforts to rescue people. He's also ordered officials to minimize casualties and to resettle those whose homes were damaged. The Vice Premier, Zhang Guoqing, has also been dispatched to the area to guide the work. Tremors and aftershocks were felt in neighbouring India as well, and Nepal, where residents in the capital, Kathmandu, reportedly ran out of their homes Tuesday morning when they felt the quake, but there were no immediate reports of damage. Nepal has sent more than 2,500 police officers to assess damage and to look for victims. The epicenter was also around 75 kilometers north of Mount Everest. Local authorities have closed down a base camp. And winter is not a popular season for climbing the world's highest mountain, and many residents have migrated to lowland areas. But some tourists do visit the area. The Himalayan region is prone to powerful earthquakes. In 2015, a quake in Nepal with a magnitude of 7.8 killed nearly 9,000 people.
Laura Westbrook, thank you so much for that report. So what happens before and after an earthquake? I can now speak to Mark Allen, who is a professor at the Department of Earth Science at Durham University. Mark, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Now, this was one of China's deadliest earthquakes in years. Why is this region so susceptible to them?
Hello. As your reporter said, this particular region sits close to a boundary between two tectonic plates, India and Asia, which are still converging with each other at about 40 millimeters a year. And that doesn't sound much, but over geological time, that's a rapid rate of motion. And that has to be accommodated somehow by slip on faults, which riddle the Earth's plates. And it's when those faults are moving quickly that we get the release of energy that we call an earthquake. So whilst we can't usefully and precisely predict when any individual fault will move and produce a disastrous earthquake, we do have a good picture overall of which areas are prone to earthquakes, and we can make general forecasts which areas are likely to see earthquakes in the future.
It's been reported as being a magnitude of at least 6.8. How big is this historically for that particular area?
It's on the large size. That the reported range I've seen so far is 6.8 to 7.1. I think it's unlikely within the interior of Tibet you'd ever get something much higher than around 7.5 for the kind of fault that you see within the interior of the plateau. The earthquakes along the Himalaya to the south, like the one in Nepal in 2015, they can get higher. They can get into the high sevens range or even maybe a magnitude 8. And what you have to remember is that this magnitude scale that the geophysicists use, that there is a what we call a power law difference as you go up each unit of the scale. So the energy release in an earthquake of magnitude 7 is 32 times, what you would see in an earthquake of magnitude 6, and that would be 32 times what you'd see in an earthquake of magnitude 5, and so on. So what might seem like relatively minor differences in magnitude, in reality can mean a huge increase in the power between one earthquake and another.
Mark, having this geological knowledge that you have, is there anything authorities can do to prepare an area for such an event?
As I say, we can't usefully and accurately predict when the next earthquake's going to appear, but we can make forecasts based on the geological background of an area, based on the past earthquake record. And authorities can use this information to decide what building codes should be in place, how big an earthquake is an area likely to face in the coming decades or 100 years or even 1,000 years. And then crucially, they can enforce those building codes, because it's useless if the laws are there, but the people on the ground are not following them.
Rescue missions are currently ongoing. Is there a risk of further aftershocks during this time? We know that some have already been reported.
Yes, unfortunately, there will be for weeks and even months to come. Hopefully, they will all be smaller than the main event, the main shock, which we've already had, and their size will continue to decline over time. There is a risk that this earthquake could yet trigger another substantial event on an adjacent fault, which has had an increase in the stress load on it as a result of the recent event. It was that kind of scenario that took place in Turkey nearly 2 years ago, where one very big earthquake was followed in quick succession by one of similar size in an adjacent area. But that scenario is relatively rare. It's more likely that there'll continue to be aftershocks. Some of these could be damaging in their own right. They'll all be very worrying to the people in that area, but hopefully they won't be anything like the scale of this original event.
Mark Allen, Professor of Earth Scientists at Durham University, thank you so much for your insights. Now, the UK government's continuing to resist calls for a public inquiry into so-called grooming gangs as an online row with Tesla founder Elon Musk also stretches into another day. Musk has been sharply critical of UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and called him evil in a posting on X today. Ollie Barrett has this report from London.
Well, the UK government continuing to hold the line that it doesn't believe that there should be a new national inquiry into these so-called grooming gangs. What it does say is that it is going to implement recommendations made in a 2022 inquiry here in Britain into child sexual abuse, but the government not able to put a timeline on when all of those recommendations are going to be implemented. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says that legislation will be brought forward by the government, which will, among other things, make it a criminal offence for people who work with children if they fail to report allegations of abuse. But the Conservative Party, the opposition Conservatives, continue to call for a national inquiry, as does the smaller opposition party, the Reform Party, led by Nigel Farage. Indeed, Reform say that if a national inquiry isn't forthcoming, they will set up their own version of it to try and get to the bottom of some of these problems that they say may still be going on in some English towns and cities. This grooming gang, or so-called rape gang scandal, relates to a series of English towns and cities in which it was revealed that over a period of years, young women and girls were being abused by gangs, often made up of men of British Pakistani descent. Now, the row also continues between the ex-owner Elon Musk, who has been furiously criticising the UK government over this issue in recent days. That criticism has continued even after the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer hit back against what he called lies about the grooming gangs issue, and he also came in for some criticism from the Conservatives and Reform Keir Starmer for suggesting that people calling for a national inquiry were jumping on the bandwagon of the far right. So these political arguments continue, but as I say, Elon Musk is not backing down, using his own social media platform to attack the government and Keir Starmer himself. Keir Starmer, before he became a politician, was the director of public prosecutions. Now, Elon Musk says that shows that he was complicit in some of these crimes. Keir Starmer says that actually his record as director of public prosecutions was in making changes in that organisation to make sure that people could be prosecuted in the right way for exactly the type of crimes that Elon Musk is talking about online. So the row very much continues here in domestic politics in the UK, but also that transatlantic row between Elon Musk and the UK government. The UK government very cautious about pushing back too much in a personal sense against Elon Musk, because it knows that the entrepreneur is going to be an important part of the incoming Trump administration in the White House in January. So a difficult path for the UK government to tread. It insists, though, that it is tackling some of the issues around the so-called grooming gang scandal here in Britain. Ollie
Barrett in London, thank you so much for that. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. International flights have resumed at Syria's main airport in Damascus today, the first time since the fall of the country's former president Bashar al-Assad. A Syrian Airlines flight to Sharjah took off earlier this morning, the first international commercial flight since the 8th of December. Now, Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England, and a former advisor to Justin Trudeau, says he's considering entering the race to replace him as the leader of Canada's Liberal Party. Trudeau announced his resignation as Canada's Prime Minister on Monday after 9 years in the role, following pressure from his party and poor opinion polls. Trudeau's former deputy, Chrystia Freeland, and Transport Minister Anita Anand are two of the other potential candidates predicted to stand. Jean-Marie Le Pen, the former French right-wing leader and father of current party chief Marine Le Pen, has died at the age of 96. Le Pen famously made headlines across the world when he ran for president against Jacques Chirac in 2002. Donald Trump Jr. has arrived in Greenland, days after his father Donald Trump repeated his interest in controlling the Arctic island. Greenland, a territory of Denmark, is home to a large US military base. The president-elect had previously said the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity. Meanwhile, the country's prime minister has dismissed Trump's suggestion, adding that Greenland is not for sale. And the US actress Aubrey Plaza has thanked supporters and asked for privacy after the death of her director and screenwriter husband, Jeff Bainer. The family have described his death by suicide as an unimaginable tragedy. To Russia now, where Putin's forces claim to have captured the Koracha in Ukraine's Donetsk region. Koracha, once home to 18,000 people, lies 35 kilometers from the Poroskova, a significant logistics hub in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine has not acknowledged the capture of the area as yet, but if confirmed, Koracha would become the first major settlement to fall to Russian control after the capture of Avdiivka and Vuhledar last year. Let's go live to Moscow now to speak to our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova. Dasha, good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Koracha is an area which has been much sought over. Tell us why Russia was so keen to capture it, despite it being reduced to rubble in recent months.
Well, indeed, the Russian Ministry of Defense has confirmed that Russia is now in control of Koracha, and it is an important logistics hub, as the ministry has explained, because the capture of this city, one of the largest in the southwestern Donbas, will mean that there will be very complicated logistical supplies for the Ukrainian military. We also know from the Russian Ministry of Defense that this area has been significantly fortified over the course of the past decade. Ever since 2014, the Ukrainians have been building constant firing position in that area. They have been firing against the regional capital of Donetsk, especially from this very side. They also have the very developed system of underground network and tunnels. So certainly for Russia, it was very important to have this city captured, because that will be opening the new horizons for the Russian military in that area, given more room for maneuver further on that direction. We also understand that this fighting has been taking place over the course of several months, and the Russian Ministry of Defense has explained that this area has not only been fortified, but it also has some natural water basin that has made it very difficult for the Russian assault units to work in that area. So now we have the confirmation from Moscow that this area is under the Russian control, and that means there will be less shelling of the Russian territories, at least those that Russia claims as its own, and especially the regional capital of Donetsk.
Dasha, Ukraine has not confirmed that the area is under Russian control as of yet, but if confirmed, it becomes the third area to be seized by Russian forces. Do we know where the Russian military is keen to target next?
Well, we understand that Moscow will be going further towards the city of Pokrovsk, and this is another logistics hub that Moscow believes is important to be captured. So especially given the very fact that this fortified area has come under the Russian control, we understand it will be much easier for the Russian military to go further. We also know from the Russian Ministry of Defense that in that area, Ukraine has deployed 15,000 troops, including foreign mercenaries, and 80% of those, according to Moscow, that is 12,000, have been lost during the months of fighting for the city of Koracha. So the understanding is that now Moscow will have easier way forward, and the speed of Russian advances is expected to be accelerated.
We're hearing that Donald Trump's Ukraine envoy to Kyiv has been postponed until after his inauguration in 13 days. Plus, Zelensky's approval ratings seem to have plummeted, according to a new poll. How have these two stories gone down in Moscow, Dasha?
Well, Moscow has long been saying that what is required to end the conflict in Ukraine is to have the long-term solution. No short-term solutions will be welcome, at least here in the Russian capital. We know from the Russian side that they do not have any illusions when it comes to the new administration in the United States. However, we also understand that Moscow has been saying that the outgoing administration of Joe Biden has been adding fuel to the fire. So Moscow is quite confident in its military military. What they say they have to do at the moment is to rely on the course of what they describe as their special military operation in Ukraine. Speaking of Zelensky, Moscow has long been saying that the Western curators of Kiev authorities, as Russian officials often describe the government in Ukraine, have long tried to make sure that Zelensky lowers the conscription age, and that will be his final decrease, according to the Russian officials. So in Moscow, they say very clearly that the popularity of the current Ukrainian authorities are very low. But what Moscow has been insisting once again is that they don't really discuss those issues. What matters for them is to make sure that Russia has long-term security guarantees, and that means the achievement of Russia's goals in Ukraine.
Dasha, Chernyshova in Moscow, thank you so much for joining us this evening. January the 7th marks 10 years since the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris, when 12 people were killed when two gunmen opened fire at the offices of the satirical newspaper. A ceremony took place in Paris on Tuesday to mark the anniversary, as Ross Cullen reports.
10 years ago in Paris, gunfire in the French capital. 12 people shot dead in a terror attack on the offices of the satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo. 8 of the editorial staff and cartoonists died, along with 2 police officers and 2 other people working in the building at the time. 2 brothers, Sharif and Said Koracha, carried out the shootings. They themselves were shot dead by police 2 days later in an industrial estate. The French president at the time of the attacks was François Hollande. He said a call with a friend and member of the Charlie Hebdo editorial team moments after the tragedy was his strongest memory of that period.
There are scenes that I will never forget, but we had to act, and I think we did it responsibly. And then we were aware that it was not over, that there would be other tragedies that would come, and there were some.
On the 8th of January, an accomplice of the brothers, Amadi Koulibaly, killed a police officer to the south of Paris. Then, on the 9th of January 2015, Koulibaly shot dead 4 Jewish people he had held hostage in an attack on this kosher supermarket in eastern Paris. The attacks sparked massive demonstrations supporting freedom of expression and the I Am Charlie marches of solidarity with the killed satirists. On Tuesday, President Macron, Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo, along with François Hollande, took part in several ceremonies across the French capital to honour the victims 10 years on.
These 2 attacks were the first deadly incidents of 2015, a year which finished with the November attacks in the French capital, focused on the Bataclan theatre, in which 130 people died. Ross Cullen, Al Arabiya News, Paris.
Let's take a look at the top business news. The boss of NVIDIA has unveiled the computer giant's next-generation gaming chips known as the RTX 50 series. The announcement was part of Jensen Huang's keynote address during his annual tech show in Las Vegas. The new family of chips will use NVIDIA's Blackwell AI systems to create movie-quality images and will be twice as fast as their predecessors. Facebook owner Meta has announced the appointment of 3 new board members, including Dana White, the CEO of UFC and close friend of Donald Trump. It comes as the company's chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, appears to be mending ties with Trump ahead of the US president-elect's inauguration this month. Meta has also announced it will abandon the use of independent fact checkers on Facebook and Instagram, replacing them with X-style community notes. Elon Musk now, if we have a look at sport, could become the next owner of Liverpool Football Club. His father, Errol Musk, says his billionaire son would love to take over the Merseyside team. The Musk family have relatives who hail from the area and claim to be members of the Beatles. And tennis star Cameron Norrie has apologised after throwing his racket into the crowd and hitting a spectator in Auckland. The British number 2 received a warning from the umpire during his match with Fukan Diaz Acosta, which he went on to lose. Norrie says he is disappointed in himself and admitted he was lucky to escape punishment. A reminder of our top stories today. Trump reverses Biden's ban on offshore drilling and calls the New York judge responsible for sentencing him for the hush money case deranged. A devastating earthquake kills 126 people in China, according to state media, near the Tibetan holy city of Shagatsa. The British government announces new legislation to tackle child abuse, but says it won't open inquiry into UK grooming gangs. And 10 years on from the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris, President Macron pays tribute to the victims who did lose their lives. And that's all from us on W News. Thanks for joining us. Riz Khan is coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson on GNT. Good night.